Good afternoon. So today's project is we're going to try to get our Husqvarna 365 Special running. What it's doing is if you fire it up, you put the choke on, crank it up, fires right up, then it dies right out almost instantly. We're pretty sure it's a fuel line, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the fuel line, the fuel filter, give it some fresh fuel, put a new air filter on it because it's never had one in its life, and just generally clean it up, and then we're going to go give it a try and see if it works. So come on in with us while we tear this apart and see if we can get this running the way we'd like it to run. Okay, so we're going to take the top cover off right here, and it has a couple little plastic snaps. You can do it with your finger generally. I'm using a screwdriver for demonstration. Just get in, pop that open. Take the cover off, set it aside. The air filter has this little metal thing that flips up, and then the air filter picks right off. Now, you may want to blow this out before you take the air filter off. It's a little hard to get in there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that back on. And we're going to try blowing that out real well, just so we don't knock too much loose stuff down into the carburetor. That's a little better, and you can see that filter is pretty dirty. They're almost like a fabric in there, and over time with a little bit of oils and stuff in the wood, it soaks in there, and they do come apart. You can pop them open here, right there. You can pop them open and rinse them all out, but we've gone ahead and bought a new one. They weren't very expensive. So we're going to go ahead and dig the fuel line out of this thing, and we have to take the gas cap off, and we drained most of the gas out of this ahead of time. We take the gas cap right out, set it out of the way. And then this is going to be really hard to show you, but the fuel line basically comes over in here to the carburetor, and it goes inside the tank. So generally speaking, we unhook it up here on the carburetor, take a long pair of needle nose and go in the tank and pull it out. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get our new fuel line, get all of our new parts out here, we're going to get the tools we need, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we've got a new spark plug, we've got a new fuel filter, we've got a new air filter, and our fuel line. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dig this fuel line out of here and go ahead and start putting it back together. And I don't know if we can get you down in there. See if we can prop this thing up somewhere where you can see. So the hose right in there is disappearing down into the tank. So that's our old hose, and you'll see right there how that's all basically dry rotted. So sucking air. So we're pretty sure that was our problem. Alright, so getting new fuel line back in is a bit more of a battle than getting the old one out, because you've got a deck to go through here and it goes down into the tank sideways. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to tear into this a little bit and figure out what we got to loosen up to get that fuel line in, and we'll be back once we get to that point and we'll show you what we found. Okay, we've taken the 4 screws out of our handle. We'll set that out of our way. And now we're going to see what we can do as far as getting in there. And it's probably an easier way. This is how I know to do it. So right in there is where the hole is, right down in where my finger is. Alright, so as you can see, we ended up taking the fuel tank all the way out. I just wasn't able to get the line through there, through that little hole in the saw. I decided that it was worth the effort. It's probably an easier way, I just don't know it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean this up, and we're going to come back and show you how to put the line in, put the filter in the tank, and then we'll reassemble the saw piece by piece and show you how to do that. Alright, so we've got everything cleaned up. We got the tank out. The little hole right here is where the fuel line has to go. So we're going to put a little dab of oil on that fuel line so that we can try to get it through that hole. And like I said, it's probably a lot easier way to do this. I just don't happen to know it. And the goal is to get it inside the tank enough I can reach it with the needle nose. It's pretty hard to see up in there, but see if we can get it now. Okay, so now what we're going to do, you see we've got it through there. We're going to get our filter out. And we're going to cut that line, because that line was, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but that line is cut at a very steep angle. So we're going to cut some of that off. And we're going to put that filter on there. Just like so. And we're going to set that in there for now. Now what we have to do is we have to put this back into the saw and run this up through the hole to the carburetor at the same time. So we're going to see if we can set you up to watch that. It's a little bit of an awkward spot, so hold on, we'll be right back. Alright, so this is the base of the saw. The chain will go on this side and point straight down. The throttle handle is going to go up here. So this little hole right here is where we have to go through with the fuel line. So we're going to pull a little extra fuel line through. We'll pull it back when ready. We also have to get the throttle up through there. There's a few things we have to do, but we're going to go ahead and get the fuel line first. Like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a pair of vice grips on that just so we don't lose it. So I'm going to take a small pair of vice grips and put them on that fuel line. We're going to have to cut that end off too anyways, because it's cut at that large taper, so we're not hurting anything. And that way I can muck around getting my fuel tank back in there, my throttle cable back in there and everything. And I haven't got to worry about losing that back out through the hole. So there's a rubber grommet that the throttle cable goes through. Okay, we got our throttle cable through. Now we're going to connect our kill switch again. And then we're going to reach in and pull our fuel line back out so that we can take the slack out of our fuel line as we watch up in there and don't make too much of a mess. Now, there is a plastic bushing that goes on this pin right here, and the tank rolls up into that, in theory. Something like that. And it rolls down in on this side. Just like that. So what we want to do before we go any farther is we want to make sure that we don't have too much slack in our fuel line. And I think we're in pretty good shape. So now we're going to go ahead and put our screws back in our tank, which there were 3 screws, and they're all different. So you have to remember where those came out of. Those are the only 3 that are different like that. There's a machine screw with the shoulder that goes right here. And then there's a machine screw down here with no shoulder. See if I can get out of your way so you can see what I'm doing there. That one's in behind the bar and chain. Third one goes through the handle, so we're going to set that aside. But there is this bolt that I'll point out. This little bolt right here, it's got the shoulder on the end of it. This goes right in this hole right here. And if you're not able to figure out why you can't get your fuel tank out, after about 15 minutes of diligent fiddling, you'll realize that bolt is in there. It's kind of like a safety, I guess. And that bolt has to come out in order to get the fuel tank out. Don't ask me how I know that. Alright, so now the fuel tank's back in. We're going to go ahead and get reset up here, reorganized, get the saw back on the bench, and we're going to have you watch us hook up the carburetor, the throttle cable, change the spark plug, and then we'll just get it ready to go. Okay, so now we're going to hook our fuel line back up. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut about a 1/2 inch off that fuel line. And right here on top of the carburetor is where that goes, like where we unhooked it from. And the important thing here is to make sure that you don't have any kinks in this line, especially between the body of the saw and the tank. And that's pretty much it for that. We're going to spin the saw around carefully because things still aren't really connected together the best. We're actually going to tuck that fuel filter right inside the tank. We're going to put our fuel cap back in now before we screw up and get too much dirt or something in there. Okay, now the throttle cable comes up through a little fitting right there. And there's actually a cut in it, so you don't actually have to feed it up through, but you do have to get the jacket of the cable up into it. Let's see, okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put some of the plastic and the handle and all that stuff back on, and then we'll change the spark plug and we'll just see if it works. Alright, so we're going to put our handle back in. That'll really start to tie things together. I'm going to kind of stand it up like that, see which way is the best way to work this thing back in. There we go. Something like that. And that has these 4 like sheet metal looking screws that go into that, into the plastic of the tank itself. And then there's the one long one that looks similar that goes into the cylinder head shock absorber right here. And we're going to tip it up and do the bottom 2. Now I took these 4 screws out from under the carburetor thinking it might do something for me, but it really didn't. And I do suspect that maybe you could actually take the carburetor off and go down through this way instead of taking the tank off. I'm not 100% sure, but it looked more complicated to me, so we didn't go that route. Okay, we're going to put the top cover back on. It has 3 screws. Now we're going to go ahead and put our new air filter on before we change the spark plug, and that way we eliminate as much chance of dropping anything down. And that basically just snaps down in like that, and that piece locks down under like that, and you got it. Okay, we're going to put our air filter cover on, and then we have to put our bar and chain on, which we'll see if we can get you set up for. There's a couple ways to do that. I had pretty good luck setting the saw on its side like that. I'm going to do just a little bit more cleaning before we get that on there. Okay, so other than the obvious, the chain wants to be such that it's cutting on the way back down the bottom of the saw, not on the top. So your teeth want to be, the point of your tooth wants to be pointing back towards your saw on the bottom. So then with the chain and the blade in the hand like that, we flip it over a little bit. There's a hole right here. See if we can get you in there and see that. That's where the oil from the saw itself gets injected into the bar for the chain. So we want to make sure that's not plugged with anything, especially if we're turning our bar over. You can actually turn these bars upside down once they start to wear and get a little bit more use out of them. So now we're going to put our side cover on. There is an adjustment screw in the side of these saws. The older ones, it's in the front. I'm going to loosen it up quite a bit for now to get that to go down in there. Starter nuts on there. What I like to do is snug them just a little bit right here like this, and then I put it down like this, and you see how loose the chain is. Now I'm going to loosen it about a quarter of a turn on each one, and I'm going to tighten my chain. And then if you pick the blade up, you'll see that it loosens a little bit. I like to hold the blade up. I like to snug it until it's just, it's a little too tight. The one thing you got to be careful of is you want it to have a little bit of looseness in it. If it's too tight, it will constantly be stretching. What I mean by that is you'll go to cut some firewood or a tree, and you'll come back in, you'll be looking at your saw, you'll say, well, my chain is loose. You'll go ahead and tighten it up like that, and next time you do it, it'll be loose again because it keeps stretching. So you want it just a little loose. Snug them up. All right, so it's all back together. We're going to go fill it up full of fuel. We're going to open the door, get you set up so you can watch. We're going to see if it starts and runs okay. So hold on. All right, so we filled it up full of fuel, get the choke on, switches on. Seems to run. Maybe we'll go get our mask and we'll go down and see if we can cut a log or two to make sure that it stays running. So it seems to be running just fine. So we'll call that a fix and wrap up this video. So any questions, comments, leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.